Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. It means the world to me. Thank you very, very much. And today we welcome along I don't know really how to explain this, really, a real hero of mine through these doors today, a theatre director who's just a master at what she does. And it's an honor to have her today. And that, of course, that is Yaël Farber. And did I say that right? Is it Yael or Yael? Which one would you prefer?
Uh, It's actually Yael,
Yael.
but I'll answer to Yale. It's
Okay,
fine. I'm
cool.
used to it.
We'll stick to that one. That's great. So let's take a moment to introduce Yael and her work for anyone who maybe not be familiar. Yael is a multi-award-winning playwright director whose productions have received international acclaim. Her productions have toured all over the globe, being praised for their visceral quality. She has two Olivier Award nominations, both for Best Revival of a Play. That was for Macbeth at the Almeida in 2022, and of course The Crucible at the Old Vic in 2014. She has 29 awards to her name, including 10 nominations for Salomé, which involved the Helen Hayes Awards for Best Director in Play, 7 awards from the Evening Standard, Broadway World, Amnesty International Freedom of Expression, Best of Edinburgh, Fleur in South Africa, and FNB Vita for Shopping and Fucking by Mark Ravenhill. Fantastic play, by the way. She has tackled King Lear at the Almeida, Macbeth at the Almeida, My Brilliant Friend in the National Theatre of Iceland, Hamlet, LeBlanc, Salome, and of course, The Crucible. And she is currently writing a new book with a working title called Playing with Fire. More on that later on in the episode. And she has written 4 original plays, A Woman in Waiting, He Left Quietly, Malora, which is an adaptation of Sophocles, and Amajuba. Did I say that right?
Yes, I'm a Juba.
Amajuba as well. And that's just a small sample of Yael's incredible work. And like I said, she's a true hero of mine, and we welcome along her today. Yael, hello.
Hello, Ollie. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Yeah, like I say, you're just a hero of mine and got so much to talk to you today about the Crucible and all things in between. But before we get on to that, we start at the beginning. So where did it come from, yeah, the love of directing?
Ollie, I think the bug bit me very early. I've spoken about this before, but I grew up in apartheid South Africa, and it was really a society very vehemently committed to suppressing truth
Mm,
and maintaining illusions around certainly things that we were protecting in the white suburban bubbles that we lived in. And when I went to see, certainly reading The Crucible by Arthur Miller when I was 13 in the bath, um, the bug hit me, and I think then I just decided if this is what theatre is about, I want in. But in my teen years, I ended up at the Market Theatre watching protest theatre, and it really felt like the only place in my life that really the truth unfettered was being told to me, and that I was actually being called to hear something that felt in closer synchronicity with what I was understanding the world to be. And I understood then that theatre can either suppress truth or it can actually bring truth. It's a very powerful mechanism, very ancient technology. And I just decided then and there that I wanted to be at the steering wheel. I did act for a few years when I left university, but I soon found my way into directing.
yeah, just tell me about your acting years. What were they like?
Um, I think every director should act for a while. It's very humbling. You realize you never forget. I mean, I've never forgotten when I'm directing in the room. I never forget the vulnerability involved in being on the other side of the line, and that you've got to really, make an offer in that room and then in the larger room, night after night, and bring an incredible disarmed version of yourself and be able to bring the character. And so I see it as a kind of extraordinary apprenticeship that I went through. But it wasn't my place. I could feel it. It was kind of like I wanted to be in theatre, but the jacket didn't quite fit. And it's harder, I think, when you're a young woman leaving drama school. It certainly was for me at that time. It was just easier to be offered roles as a 5'1" woman than to say, I want to take the wheel at 23. I think I was 22 when I graduated. So, but extraordinary time for me to also witness from that side of the room what it's like. And yeah, exciting time, but I am where I'm meant to be now.
Absolutely, of course, and we thank you for it. I remember us talking before. Did you have a friend who sort of like gave you a push in the right direction to see
Yes.
yeah, you're a great actor, but directing is your thing?
Yeah, she was a little rougher about it than that. And true friends will call you to your, to the truth. She came to see me, and I was performing in a play, and I was getting good reviews and having lots of fuss made about what I was doing. And I secretly felt like it really wasn't what people were saying. I think a lot of actors suffer from that, though, actually. So if there are any actors watching this, it's not to say that if you feel that it's true. But in
Oh
my
no.
case, Lara, who I really, really respected and respect very deeply. We're still deeply creative partners to each other in many ways. She came and saw it, and she's got these very piercing blue eyes, and she was sitting with me at the bar afterwards, and she just looked at me, Farber. So cuck means shit or crap in Afrikaans, in slang, South African slang. Everybody uses the word. She said, "When are you going to stop being a cuck actress and be a great director?"
Wow.
And she has since said, she knew she just had to go in hard to wake me up. She said, "You were fine, you were okay," but she saved me a decade maybe of pushing through on the path of least resistance, and she actually put up the money for for my first professional directing gig. She had marginally more money than I was, and she was operating follow spot at night at the Market Theatre, and she just said, "I'm going to use that money to produce any one-man show that you want to do, one-woman show, whatever it is," and then she produced the next one. So she really is the person that kind of pulled me towards, my calling, what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I think like it's interesting, like you talking about directing and stuff. We'll talk about the Crucible in just a moment, but I couldn't help but notice that you've written 4 original plays, like I mentioned in the intro as well. So, so I'm thinking about, well, when you're writing a play, of course you've got the director's brain on you as well. You're like thinking about how we can do this, what story do I want to tell here, etc. I mean, how does your director's process feed into your writing process?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think I definitely write. I only write when the play that I want to direct doesn't exist. So I'm writing it to direct it. In fact, I've had some of my plays now directed by other people, and it's the strangest thing for me. I haven't even gone to see these, also because geographically it's across the world, but I've never written with the idea that somebody else would take the vision. So my stage directions are very detailed because I'm really putting what I think should be happening on that stage into it. So it's very informed by that. I think I see myself as a director who writes at this point. I know that if I dedicated myself more deeply to the craft of writing, which is more and more appealing and calling me, I might come at it differently. But even as a director, I work, I'm going to say something obvious here, but I work very visually from the get-go.
Yeah.
I'll get flashes of images of something before I even know what play it belongs in. Like when I adapted my Miss Julie, I just kept seeing a tree, an indigenous South African tree, busting up through these large red tiles of a kitchen floor that you find in a lot of the old Afrikaans farmhouses. And I didn't know what play this belonged in. And then it'll kind of deposit itself in various works until, as an example, that work found its full fruition in Miss Julie. So because I get images before I get anything, it's pre-verbal almost, the creative process for me. I definitely come at the writing from that position.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to quickly mention Salome as well, which I know you produced, well, you wrote that and you directed it, I think, at the National very recently. And it's currently on National Theatre at home, guys. If anyone wants to watch it, please do. It's a wonderful, beautiful production. It's very, very, very Yale. It's just definitely got your stamp on it, which is really, really good. So yeah, I mean, I don't know the story of Salome like too well, but I think it's a ancient story. It's almost biblical in some
Right.
ways. Yes, and of course, so many people have adapted it and looked at it and interpreted it in many different ways. But what was it about Salome's story what part of Salome's story did you feel you wanted to tell, or was there anything you felt like you hadn't been told about her story?
Yeah, I mean, I felt it had been suggested to me, and then I thought about what I wanted to do with it, and we created the original production in America with a company, and I'm very ensemble driven. So what rose out of that company was very unique to that, and the transposition to another environment and with half the cast was another conversation, another journey in and of itself, and can be a perilous road. But the originating impulse was. She's a figure that is largely understood to be the feminine, the terrifying feminine, the girl who called for the head of John the Baptist. When she did the dance of the seven veils for Herod and his cohorts at Maccareus. So it's an ancient biblical story that is mentioned in the Bible, in the New Testament, in the Christian Bible. And what I was interested in was why. Well, first of all, oh gosh, Ali, this is a whole other conversation, but I'll be succinct, hopefully. I mean, essentially, even the names of people in the Christian Bible is part of how Judea was occupied and co-opted. And so John the Baptist is actually Yochanan Hamabil. Jesus Christ is Yeshua. These are, Jews living in ancient Judea at the time in an occupied country, which of course is very fascinating to now look through the whole lens of in current world events, and that's certainly a conversation for another time. But Salome is Shulamit, actually, and I was interested in the idea that Christ can also be understood as not so much as a religious figure, but as a political figure, and someone who is actually agitating for change within the occupation, and yeah, the retelling of this story is from a very Christian perspective that has reached the world, and a very Western perspective. But I'm interested in it even from Edward Said's point of view of how we feminize indigenous populations, and we create this idea, we as in colonizers can create an idea of an hysterical native population who are sort of subject to these overwrought feelings of religiosity. But in fact, there was a deeply political strain to what was happening, and God was a political issue. So the idea was that she calls for the head of John the Baptist because she has this extraordinary encounter down in the aqueduct in the, oh God, now I've forgotten the word, the hole where the water gathers. God, I can't believe I've forgotten the word. But anyway,
You'll come
and
back. You'll come back.
where he's been kept as a prisoner. So this was very reminiscent for me of Nelson Mandela being taken off to Robben Island and being isolated away from the population so that he couldn't, because Yochanan Hamed Bilwa, John the Baptist, was creating quite a stir. He was an extraordinary, charismatic agitator who was calling on the Romans, but also his own people for change, because always in occupations you have your people who collaborate with the given powers. And so the idea was that Herod was, I interpret it from a political lens, Herod was resisting executing Hamad Bil because execution was very, very common. Christ was just another man, if you strip out the religious belief system, who was crucified. And Herod was resisting executing him, so as not to martyr him, which is exactly what the South African government was doing with Nelson Mandela. And so Salomé understands when she meets him down in the word I can't remember, that that if she calls for his head, his name will light up and it will blaze and the resistance will be formed. And so when she calls, bring me the head of Yochanan Hamadbil, she's actually part of the resistance. And this leads the audience to understand that she has been compressed into what is often happens with female figures in our past. They get reduced to being a sexual being. So all that it now is understood as, she did an erotic dance, and then she, with a kind of irrationalism, called for the head of John the Baptist, and she's been vilified for it. So it was a revisionist version.
Wow, sounds brilliant. Yeah, I need to go back and visit that. Actually, it's just how you sort of craft like political lenses into these ancient stories, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Very, very hard, and our transfer to London was very difficult, and we had a we had a really rough time, but the originating production was I think was quite special, and there was so anyway, that's another whole conversation. In my book, I'm calling it the critical chapter, because we must all, and I'm saying this to any directors who are watching this, and actors, any artist, we have to go through those moments where we lose the thread, where we are misunderstood, where we are, and I think this is it's if you metabolize these experiences well, they become an extraordinary thing in your artillery as an artist.
Yeah, for sure. I think talking of political lenses, I think that's a very good segue onto the Crucible as well, because now I know we've spoken off air about this quite a bit, but your production of the Crucible, Yaël, was just I failed to find words for it. It was just brilliant, honestly. The way that you crafted this story, the way you presented it, the actors you found, the dynamics you found it in between all of them, and brought these characters to life. In my mind, it's the definitive version of the Crucible. I think any other production from now on, I'd say to them, okay, well, good luck. Good luck. You've got a very, very high bar to get through, and of course, Yaël set it all the way up here. But it was just fantastic. And if anyone who, you can still watch it, guys, if you go on Digital Theatre, subscribe, you've got the whole production there. And of course, you've got a great interview, of course, with Richard Armitage, who played John Proctor, speaking to Matt Wolfe, who's the international critic for the New York Times. It's a fantastic interview. And Richard goes into a lot of detail about the rehearsal process, who Proctor is, and everything in between. So go check it out. Anyway, so Yaël, tell me about your first encounter of this play. I believe you said you were 13 and you read it in the bath.
Yes. I had a long conversation with my sister, who was studying it as a set work. She was 15, I was 13. She might have been a bit older, and then she left me alone, and I just dived into this, into the script. And I was in there for 3.5, 4 hours, until my fingers had gone wrinkled, because I just couldn't believe what I was reading, and I think it was a combination of the utter brilliance of it. I really do think it is, if not the finest, it's among the finest. I mean, if we include Shakespeare and a few others, sure. It's among the finest plays ever written. But it was also my context in South Africa, living in a country where I was grappling with the cognitive dissonance of what do you do inside a context where what is wrong is being positioned as right, what is evil is being positioned as righteous and even Christian, and Proctor's journey to himself, to the core of himself, the self-hatred, the secret he is harboring, and the beauty, the absolute beauty of that tender unfolding between him and Elizabeth, the delicacy of that in comparison to the brutality of the piranha-like attack, that the onslaught that was coming societally, and I think also because I was very in touch as a white South African with how we can convince ourselves, and people around me who I loved, how people convince themselves that, you know, doing harm to others is not only okay, but even right and righteous.
Yeah.
So there's so many things, and it's the portraits that he, down to Rebecca knows each tiny, every single person is given such a three-dimensionality. Anyway, so there I was in the bath at 13 reading this. And my sister had given me the background, and I just, it was like a fever. And I feel like I've never come out of the fever of my love for what is possible in this medium. And one doesn't always, more often than not, you're not sitting with a script of that brilliance in your hands. But that was definitely the moment I fell in love, and I'm still in love.
Oh yeah, no, you made me fall in love with the play as well because, funny enough, I read it in school actually. Of course, I think I was probably about 13 as well at the time, and I think I read it and I was just like, to be perfectly honest, I didn't get it at the time. My brain hadn't sort of functioned, like I wasn't as far ahead of the game as you were. But then once I saw your production, actually went back to it, it was like, wow. This play, not only is it a masterpiece for dramatic purposes, writing and stuff. I'm looking down, I've got it here. But there's, I think one thing, we'll probably talk about Richard quite a bit today, actually, but one thing he says in that interview on digital theatre is that because the play is written as an allegory to McCarthyism, and he mentions a lot about how, you know, like you said there, that humanity has the capacity to do these awful things to one another. You know, people always promote how we've got to live in peace and look after each other, but sadly, as history has shown us, we've lived through times where we've been absolutely diabolical to each other, and all of that, particularly in the Crucible's case, you know, the witchcraft, McCarthyism, wherever you want to look at it, is simply based on false accusations, based on pre-agitated conceptions that someone is something just because I say they are these things.
Right.
And it's harrowing. It's absolutely harrowing. But you know, one thing that came into my head there, because the leader, I think, of the main sort of evil of all this is not only the courts, the Danforths, the Reverend Parrises, and you know, and people like that, the Thomas Putnams and everyone, but it's also Abigail, and Abigail is just. I mean, to call Abigail evil, I think evil will sue me for defamation of character. You know, I think, and just think I think, am I right in thinking that, well, of Ivy's anyway, she of course she had the affair with Proctor. Is she driven by that through an anger or the unrequited love that she knows she'll never get from him?
You know, Ollie, what's so interesting, I mean, actually a couple of years ago, I'd been asked to do a revival, and I was looking at the play anew, and I actually decided not to. I'm sure I'll come back to it maybe in my life, but it didn't feel right yet.
Sure.
But one of the things that occurred to me was it's very interesting to look at the play post Me Too. And it's something that I'm kind of loath to raise because to me, it doesn't denigrate the play in any way. It actually adds dimensionality to the play.
Yeah.
Because even when we were working, Samantha Colley is, you know,
Outstanding. Outstanding. Yeah.
But there's one of those moments. It's like Richard, like Anna Madley, Sarah playing Tituba. You know, you get these actors who you and really, you know, that company was extraordinary. And of course, the casting process is a very delicate thing, but you find those people who can come at their character with a genuine. It's not just a trope to be saying, "Oh, I'm going to be looking at this from my character's point of view." Sam was fiercely protective over Abigail, and she was right to be, because this is a young woman. She's 17. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily helpful to talk about the fact that in the original, Abigail was, I think, 12, and it was in the actual story in Salem, but there was no sexual relationship with Proctor in the actual story. That's Yes, that's a complete fictitious invention from Miller. But as always with a brilliant artist, he manages to percolate all the issues at hand, even through an invention like that. But so she was a young girl like the rest of them, little girl. She was 12. The Abigail in this play is what we are talking about now, and she's 17. Young woman would have been expected to be married by a very early age. So she's already, I'm going to use the word fair game in terms of being looked upon as a young woman who would be ready to become married, certainly before sexually active. But what's brilliant about the invention is that, first of all, you see a girl who's wildly, feverishly in love. And my daughter's 17. And the power that grips young people, but there's something about feminine early attachment and love that is so extraordinary to me, because it's got enough electricity to light up Manhattan, you know. I mean, it's so if you mislead or leave somebody, when any of us as we're adults, but a young girl who has also been, Proctor has slept with her. And what the play doesn't address is what that means for a young girl, in that emotionally, mentally, but also physically, and what it means about her future. But nonetheless, he has chosen the wrong girl.
You can say that again.
Yeah, she does not take any prisoners, or she takes prisoners, and
well,
you know.
does, yeah.
But what's brilliant about it is that I don't look at that character going, I mean, I hear you. What she does is the iteration of evil, as is what Danforth does, and Hawthorne, but they all think they're on the side of right, and she is fighting for her life. She is fighting for the man she wants. She's gripped. She's bewitched, in a sense.
Yeah.
So it's not to take away any responsibility from her. You know, she's murdering, because essentially that's what it comes down to. I think 26 people were hanged in the actual chapter in history.
Yeah. I think
somewhere
so.
around that number.
Yeah.
But it's murder. I mean, these little girls were,
yeah.
but you also don't know which among them were gripped by proper hysteria. I mean, that's what we wanted to get across in the production, was those body contortions that Imogen worked on so brilliantly. Imogen Knight with the young women playing the other young girls. They did things with their body that you can't do if you're purely faking it. I mean, people who are, I was obsessed with demonical possession when I was younger for some reason. And I used to read loads of books about it, and the body would do, you know, the whole body could bend backwards, and the spine would, you know, the back of your head could touch the back of your heels, and these are not contortion artists, but suddenly in a state of hysteria, the body becomes capable of anything. So the character that Miller, I don't want to be confusing, the character Miller is portraying in Abigail, it's premeditated. She has thought it all through, but she's in the wild grip of, number one, love, or a wild crush. But then something much more interesting comes into being: power. Power. And those girls get power, and they are the least, possibly Tituba, a black woman or man in that society, would have less power than those little girls.
Yeah.
By dint of the social structuring and slavery, etc. And Tituba was a slave, but they taste power, and there's a vengeance. And what Miller also makes very clear is these little girls and young women are also the pawns in the adults' game, land grabs. So that's what makes this play so extraordinary, is that nobody can just be written off as operating, even Danforth, all of them. It's power, it's politics, it's sexuality, it's human, it's us. It's just us in a darker hour. And that's what I wanted to convey with the Crucible. That's what I understood when I read it, was kind of blueprint. Let's not pretend we wouldn't be these people. Put to the test, who would we become? That's always the fascinating question for me.
Yeah, yeah. As in, Abigail has that wonderful line, doesn't she? I cannot sleep for dreaming. So is that like her way of saying I can't sleep because I'm haunted by all the love I have for you? She says that to Proctor, by the way. It's that she's haunted by all the love that she has for him, or of what could have been, or what she wants to happen. Would I be on the right lines there?
Absolutely, Ali. And I mean, yeah, any of us, once we've been intimate with someone, it can gain a kind of traction,
Yeah.
and if you've seen a young girl or boy, young man or woman, when they first taste that vector of attraction and power between another person, and then what doubles up is you get dumped,
Tragically
which
so.
will just, yeah, which will just take everything you're feeling and explode it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I cannot sleep for dreaming. I cannot dream, but I wake and walk about the house as though I'd find you coming through some door. Um, it's what a brilliant description of being completely and utterly whipped.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You just you can't eat, breathe, sleep without thinking about that person. And I think maybe everybody's been there, even tasted it.
Yeah, I think, and also Betty when she's asleep. I think after they've discovered in the woods, and she wakes up for a little bit, and she has I can't remember the actress's name, but if I'm going to try and find it now. I've got the program actually right here. Where is it? Because she had like a dance background as well. She was just stunning. All right. I tell you, I won't take too long looking for it. Come on. It's here somewhere. Okay, that's right. I'll come back to that later. But yeah. Anyway, the actress playing her, whose name I'll find shortly. But yeah, she had that beautiful moment where, I say beautiful, quite scary moment where Betty wakes up and goes, "You drank blood, Abby. You drank blood. You drank a charm to kill John Proctor's wife. You drank a charm to kill Goody Proctor." And Abby just goes, "Stop it," and just throws her down on the bed and goes, and she has that menacing line when she goes, "Let any of you breathe a word, I'll make nut."
The edge of a word, and I'll come to you in the dark of some terrible night, and I will bring a pointy reckoning that will shudder you. Just
Yeah.
like, fuck. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
it's terrible.
yeah, and I'll make, oh God, yeah, it carries on, and then I'll make all of you wish you'd never seen the sun go down. And you think, I mean, that, if that's not a threat, I don't know what is. And it's like, but just going back to what you said earlier about power, it's like, so Abby's like, she's driven by this love and driven by this lust, and so she's trying to do anything to make her and John become something. So she'll even drink a charm, which at that point, the niece of a pastor, for God's sake, in Paris, in Reverend Paris, to do that, to do anything, to be shackled by this love, to do anything to try and make sure that she's like attached to John forever. I mean, that it shows like the power of love and the power of ambition, I think, more than anything, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, does Elizabeth say later she thinks to dance on my grave? Um,
Yes, yes.
that Abby was trying to cast a spell, yeah, to get Elizabeth out, take her out,
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
they could take her place. And again, I think, yeah, anyone who's experienced being left by someone that you're wildly, wildly in love with, if
mm,
someone said, I mean, certainly it's a sociopath or a psychopath that then starts plotting the death of the new partner.
yeah,
But I think it begins in games. It begins with, because in the actual historical episode in Salem, Tituba did used to help the girls tell fortunes. They used to drop egg white into glasses of water and look at it, and Tituba would read this for them. And this was thrilling, absolutely thrilling. But it was, yeah, dabbling in the dark arts. And, I don't know what the equivalent of that is today, but it's like treason. It's the highest, they know that it's not only that they'd be in a kind of trouble we can't imagine, but the actual idea that they are inviting Satan into their hearts. That's what they would have been taught. So
Yeah.
they're taking a big risk. They're taking a big risk, but they're young and they're, they don't have social media.
That would have been a TikTok meltdown, wouldn't it? If that would got
Yeah.
out. But yeah, well, I don't have TikTok, so I don't know how it works. But yeah, there's I think that this is a big thing I wanted to talk to you about was as you know, I mentioned in the intro, your productions have a visceral quality, and you're fascinated. I mean, Richard again in the interview said you're fascinated by the viscera and how it's any show is a full body experience. You're not living up here in your head. The emotions are here in your body, in your chest, your legs, your gut, your back, your shoulders, your arms, And Richard said at one point when Shiva comes in to take his wife in Act 2, he says, I don't feel it in my head. I feel it in my knees and in my stomach and in my bowels. So, and that's part of your directorial signature is for the actors to discover their bodies. So tell me about your fascination with the body and how actors can use them wisely.
Yeah, again, a great question, Ollie. First of all, I didn't grow up in England. I grew up in South Africa, and I've had the huge privilege through my years of developing as an artist, of working with actors who it's a full body engagement, and it's not the Western perspective of this idea that the rest of the body is a life support for the brain because the brain is who we are and what we are and everything else is just keeping that alive. No, the body is in its entirety. There's intelligence, there's consciousness beyond the brain, and this is where meeting with great collaborators for me, like Imogen Knight. I met her on the Crucible. In fact, many of the collaborators that I was paired with for the Crucible that I met and said, yes, I'd like to work with them, have remained deeply, deeply in my circle of who I return to. Sutra
Nice.
Gilmore, designer, Imogen Knight as movement, Tim Lutkin as lights. It's just, these are my people. Anyway, I digress. Imogen is one of those people who just immediately understood. But I'd been working for years with actors in ways that the first thing we do is we just lean into the wall and press and press and press and use our words until we feel like we could pass out. That's how much we're engaged in the body. I believe that the body knows before the head knows. We don't understand animals in the world. We don't understand how high the consciousness and intelligence is. We don't give that credit to our somatic brain, which is our whole body.
Yeah.
So yeah, I work very physically, and I'm not engaged by theatre I watch where it's all in the head and it's neck up acting. I'm not engaged by it, and I'm not drawn to making it. I wouldn't know how to make theatre that just engages from the neck up. This life is a visceral, sensuous, erotic, dangerous ride, and I don't go to theatre to watch a lesser version of my life. I go to theatre to watch a greater version, a more intense version of my life in its most distilled moments, my life imagined by proxy, taken to the extreme. So to leave out the body is to me like leaving out 97% of what theatre is, which is a ritual. Theatre is a ritual.
Yeah, yeah. How is theatre a ritual to you?
Well, I'm someone who, Peter Brook said, over the centuries, the Orphic wines were sullied drop by drop until we had the gala evening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think what we have now is a very, very strange mutated version. I don't mean because I see theatre all the time that is magnificent, and I also see a lot of theatre that I think is just gunning for the gala night and is about everything that I think leaves behind its roots, which is ancient Greece, around the fire in Africa, and in the ancient civilizations around the world. We gather to witness, we gather to meet and commune, we gather to consider ourselves and our nature and to stare in the pond. So I just always think of the auditorium as kind of all of us leaning in to stare into some kind of reflection in a dark pond and see ourselves. And so it's extremely somatic. We start it with, in a great piece of theatre, they have proved everybody's heart starts to beat at the same rhythm in the auditorium. People start to breathe as one. And this is ritual. What happens is we actually lose our boundaried self, whether we're witnessing or, crucially, we're we are the I want to say shamans, but it's not shamanic. It can be, but we are the ones leading people through something in which they contact a deeper part of themselves and come into a deep conversation with themselves as a community. And we've been doing that since time began. I mean, Peter Brook again says we remember it somewhere. It's vestigial. We remember something about, I mean, I don't know about you and what your religious beliefs are, but I know that it's very rare I've walked into a temple, mosque, church, or anywhere, synagogue, where I have felt what I know I'm longing to feel, which is what our forefathers and mothers felt. But now and then I've touched it in theatre. And very rarely, but I have touched it. I've felt it, and so I'm very drawn to that, and I'm not drawn to the theatre that wants to be. And I don't dismiss other forms of theatre. I think anesthesia, the opiate for the people, is like we need it, and we need entertainment, But I'm not going to be. I'm not your gal to make. I'm not going to be making that. So yeah, I'm. Heal thy city. That's the idea. Epidaphros, Epidavros, as it's called, was a place of healing. People went to the arenas to sit there and be healed. The story of Oedipus was not written. Yes, it was a competition, and the tragedians would come together, and it was a fantastic. But it was the Dionysian festival.
Yeah.
And, yeah, all the stories about going into the... Anyway, Ollie, I could go on forever about this. I'll stop there.
Keep it coming, man. Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. You go and watch Oedipus for healing. I mean, I don't think anyone would go and watch Oedipus for healing now, but yeah, different times and all that. Yeah.
Different times, yeah. I mean, yeah, these stories are, it's the idea that we live vicariously. I mean, actors are these extraordinary humans who raise their hand and go... Like, they're people who make shoes, pull out teeth, are the doctors in society, people who argue for us as lawyers. And there are a couple of us who go, I'll tell the story. And more uniquely, actors who go, I'll be that person that everybody hates, or for a night, each night. I'll be the person who gets raped, or the person who gets killed again and again each night. I'll do it for you. Anne Carson, the magnificent Anne Carson, she has a fantastic quote that I love to say to actors, which she says, actors are not pretending, they take action on your behalf. To act is not to pretend, it's to action, it's to take action. And she says, and we sacrifice them to action. And we watch them play out aspects of our lives as we never will. And there is a healing in that, even if it's like to the pits of hell. We come out of there, in the Greek sense, through a catharsis, washed clean.
Yeah, you mentioned there about walking into like a place of worship and feeling it. I mean, is that it? Is it just peace? Is it just like a pure body sense of calm, or is it something else?
Wow, that's such an interesting question, because as you said, peace, I was like, gosh, no. But it would be for some. It would be for some. I think connected. Whether you're connecting to some kind of life force in yourself, connected to your community, connected to divinity, connected to the sacred, connected to peace, whatever that is, it's about leaving the secular world behind for a moment, for a couple of hours, and entering the dream, which delivers you to a state of lucidity, actually. It's convolution where it's not real, and yet it's realer than our real lives in some ways.
Yeah, gosh, it's always interesting. It's like that phrase, you know, when someone goes, "Are you okay?" You go, "Oh, sorry, I went somewhere else there for a second." And yeah,
Right.
maybe
That's
we
right,
did.
and
Maybe we did.
that's right. Yeah, my daughter speaks French because she grew up in Montreal, and sometimes I'll be sitting, she'll say, "Mama, you're dans la lune. You're in the moon again." The French say dans la lune. It's just you've gone again. Yeah, we go somewhere. We go
Mm.
somewhere, and sometimes it can just be distraction or thought. But I am a practitioner of meditation. I believe in its extraordinary powers and capacities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, to keep us connected. And theatre is a kind of contemplation and meditation. So I find, critics, I mean, a couple of things that, often said that I'm humorless, which is definitely, I mean, it's not the thing I put as most important in theatre for sure, but I do love a good laugh. But the other one is, that, oh God, I've lost my train of thought now. What was I saying? What were we talking
We're
about
talking,
before?
we're talking about like when you go somewhere. Let's say your daughter's
Talking of going somewhere, I was like,
walking somewhere.
where
Yeah,
was
yeah,
I?
yeah. Yeah, but your daughter said in French, like, "Mum, you've gone to the moon again. You've gone to the
Yeah,
moon."
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, it'll come back. It'll come
He'll come
back.
back, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll come back to. I want to ask you about the rehearsal room, particularly for the Crucible, in just a second. But I just want to talk about your relationship you have with your audience, and specifically on this one. Is it true that for the Crucible you wanted to, because it was in the round, what wasn't it, that you wanted
Mhm.
to cover the first three rows with some black cloths or black clothing, so there was no kind of leakage of color into this dark world. So like British audiences, like guys will come in with a bright pink shirt with a Ralph Lauren sign on, or a lady's got like a bright dress on or something to prevent any leakage of color into into this world. Is that true?
I definitely went into some passionate conversations with the producers. Yeah, because we were in the round, what happens when you're in the round is the audience, from every angle you're looking at it from, whoever's across the pond, is a part of the picture. And when you're trying to conjure Salem 1692, it is hard with the lady, as Sutra Gilmore calls it, the lady in the purple jumper in the third row with the
Yeah.
dangly earrings. It's hard. So I was just, how do we do this? How do we, because you've got to forget yourself. You've got to enter the dream. You've got to, and if that pink jumper is going to keep pulling you out. And so I did, at first I'd said, can we ask everybody to dress in black? Um, there was, John Richardson at the time, who was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm just so grateful that he was producing at the Old Vic at the time. He said to me, "This is London. It's not going to go down so well if you tell audiences what to do." So I was like, "All right. Well, I mean, I suppose in a way, but like what Punch Drunk does now." It's not only that I wanted people to not be, because it's immersive, so they also don't want that, I'm sure, that distraction of other people in their mise en scène, but it's also you need to be immersed. You need to be immersed, and you need to forget yourself as well. But anyway, so then they were like, we can't ask that. And then I started, a little bit tongue in cheek, but I started saying, well, could we have a giant cloth and everybody sticks their head through holes? we just have, heads popping up above. But anyway, the truth is, I had the wizardry of Tim Lutkin.
They just see this the whole time.
Exactly. A black ocean, and then just heads bobbing at the top. Could have been quite Dante-esque.
Just like this.
Um, yes, exactly. It would have been actually quite marvelous, I think. But Tim Lutkin is a wizard with lights, and I don't know how he did it, but through hanging lights around the rim of the balconies, he managed to create walls of smoke.
Mm,
That the whole, I mean, as anyone will know, haze, anyone who knows my work will know, haze and smoke
mm.
is the greatest
Oh,
friend and ally. But
yes.
through light and haze, he managed to create kind of a sort of blanket that kept everybody in the fog,
Yeah.
so it didn't become too disruptive.
Yeah, I said that fed in really well with the opening sequence, I think, as well, because so yeah, I mean, for anyone who hasn't watched it, sorry, slight spoiler for anyone who wants to go and see it, but it's the opening sequence of the show. You got the lights come up and Tituba walks in with what can only be described, I think, is probably what the girls were dancing around in this smoking pot and everything. And you had this lovely, lovely movement routine where with the chairs and everything of people like John Proctor became like the nucleus of this world where everyone was just surrounding and like, of course, he's the protagonist. Everyone was like circling around him and his journey and stuff. But everyone has their all other journeys, etc. What was the inspiration behind that? The opening sequence.
Actually, we went through quite a few iterations of that opening sequence, and the first few previews involved everybody going to collect their shoes out of a large pile, and their characters' shoes. So walking on stage barefoot and then slipping into their shoes, and the large piles of shoes always takes me to concentration camp images, because to me, even Sutra had a kind of a railway track, very subtle, but like a railway line. They were just two metal strips running through the center of the circle, almost like a railway track without the horizontal bars. And because the Crucible to me this is how it begins, this is how it happens. 26 people died, but 6 million people can die, or 12 million people can die. So we started with piles of shoes, but Imogen and I soon discovered that actors putting on their shoes, it's sort of interesting. Oh, sorry, do you hear that? No, there's a smoke alarm.
It's very faintly, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay. I don't think we need to evacuate, but it should be fine. So we soon discovered that actors it's sort of evocative to a point, and then actors, tying laces and all of that was not as compelling as we'd hoped. And then we got rid of that, but we really, what it is, I mean, this is pretty much in most of my work. I like to declare the company before we begin. It's not in all my work, but I like to meet the audience first. And the crucial part of that sequence was, yes, placing Proctor, setting up the community. You tell a story quickly, and the critical part of that moment was when they stare out at us.
Yeah.
And that moment is, we are you. We may be in strange clothing. We may be several hundred years in the past, in the mists of time, but we are you. Trust me, you in this position won't do any differently. So that look was really what that was about. And but also there's a kind of signature for me, and it's also a lot of how Imogen and I work together. Declare the company, declare the furniture, we're not going to pretend. Arthur Miller says, in theatre you can see the inverted commas. In film you can't see the inverted commas. But in theatre, literally, you can see beyond the frame of the stage. So this is pretend. We've built up a world in a kind of little box at the other end of the room, or on a disc that everybody's sitting around. So we see the let's pretend. And I like to declare that. I like to say, we are the ones who will tell you the story tonight. But at the same time, they were already kind of in character. And I like that porous line. Often, one of the most common questions actors ask me is, we're doing work exercises in the room, and they go, okay, but as me or my character? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Just let's enter. Like, you start with you. Everything starts with you. Everything starts with you. You're not going to, again, Brooke says, you don't stick parts on. You build from the inside out.
Yeah. That's always interesting about how, you, even though you can see that, particularly with theatre, you can see that what you're watching is essentially, you can see beyond the boundaries of the illusion in a way. But I think the sign of a really, really great show is that when those boundaries just completely disappear and you just are immersed in this thing, and you can't see, particularly like if you're in the round, like you can see, like as you say, the lady with the purple dress on in the third row opposite you. But even when she disappears, and then
you're in. You're in.
Yeah.
And you're not even thinking I'm in. And to me, if that moment doesn't happen where the audience forget, you haven't entirely succeeded. It's a womb. They've got to go into a cave. And so I've driven, people mad around the world with exit signs that I find distracting. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
we've got to get gels to dull those. And when there's a blackout, we need a true blackout. Like, can the exit signs go black it's often it's against the law, and then they have to navigate, and but obviously the audience's safety has to come first. There's no question about that. But sometimes, some theatres leave the aisle lights on right through the shows and leave the walls lit up. I'll walk into a space and the walls are kind of white or beige or gold, and I'm just like, I can't tell a story in here. I'm not going to be able to do it, because they're never going to forget that we're in this room.
Yeah.
If we don't, I can only do so much. But yeah, for me, it's about casting a spell.
Yeah, for sure. I think a very good moment in your work actually is Act Three, when you did that, and unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to see it in the theatre, unfortunately, because it sold just like that. But thank God for the recording and everything, and for digital theatre. I know it was released in cinemas for a while as well. But all the same, you still got a theatrical feeling. Well, I did anyway. A theatrical feeling sitting in the cinema, and then that's a whole other conversation. It's like academia: is it cinema? Is it theatre? But we won't get into that. But yeah, Act Three was just theatrical brilliance. I think not only from a writing perspective, but the way you did it was so vivid and so brilliant to watch. And that was that moment where I just completely was there. I was there in that courtroom. I wasn't in a theatre. I was in a courtroom in Salem, in Massachusetts, in 1692. And of course, I want to do a big shout out to not only to the whole cast, but someone in particular, Richard, but in particular Jack Ellis, who played Danforth, and who's been on here. I've interviewed Jack, and we talked a lot about the Crucible and everything, and Danforth and everything. But Danforth, we spoke about Abigail earlier, but Danforth, he's evil. He's evil, this man. Yeah, he is. He's McCarthy, isn't he?
Yeah. Nazi. He's
a Nazi, a pure Nazi, and the way that he controls that courtroom it's shockingly bad how he does it. Obviously, he controls it with an iron fist. He's like, no words escapes. He has complete control. But the way he talks to people, I think that's the first time Miller probably gets a chance to really say to the world, look, this is who we're dealing with. This is what, and it's not just McCarthy. You could maybe allude it to Hitler, to Mussolini, to Stalin, to Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein. All these Augusto Pinochet. All these evil men who just want to do absolutely nothing but control everyone around them. And if you don't agree with me, you're dead. Right. And I can kill you by simply doing this. Touch of a button, you're gone. And it opens up a whole other thing. Well, what was it like staging Act Three? Because it's so much happens.
Act Three is it's a concerto. It's so complete. It's a piece of music. The way every line is written, there's actually I can hear the rhythm, and I can hear how tightly it has to be wound, and where it runs out of control, and where the bassoon comes in, and where the triangle comes in. Staging it, we needed first that darkness, that ferocity of the girls, and so the kudos to them and to the work Imo did with them, Imogen, for the convulsions, etc. And then just a lot of character work. I spent a lot of time doing character work because you've really got the whole community in there at that point. And then we just had to run it. I remember one Saturday, just, because I do work Mondays to Saturdays, certainly on a play that length, there's no way you're only coming in 5 days a week. We just won't get through the material.
Sure.
I remember us running it and people dropping lines, because that happens when you're still in rehearsal.
Yeah.
And I'd go from the top. Like, as soon as we drop a line, we'd go back to the top and we'd start again. I ran those rehearsals like I don't know, like a football coach almost. I mean, there's artistry involved, but then you get to a point where it's like, do it again. We need more there. And I'd feel often like a conductor in a storm, like just going more, literally. But you can talk about it to a point, and then you've got to do it. And everybody has to bring their A game. And there's no like, oh, I'm just going to mark it here. Everybody has to be pumping on all cylinders, so we can actually not just discover it, but get match fit. The actors actually had to learn, like, act by act, how to stack that play into their body. So I would do that. I staged act 1, we'd run act 1, I'd stage act 1, I'd stage act 2, we'd do act 1 and 2. At the end of each week, we had 5 weeks, and I staged an act per week. And on the Friday, we'd run what we had. Because if those actors had felt what they were going to have in the last few days, they just wouldn't have had the capacity to do it. So anyway, I ran it like a tight ship. And everybody just had to come in their fullness and their a kind of martial arts awareness. I mean, that is listening. That is where the Crucible is a play that if you haven't gotten your actors to be at the most extraordinary level of listening, then you've just got a bunch of people screaming at each other. And the line is thin. And there were nights, I'm sure, where the actors, you do lose that thread, and then you're just all yelling. People are shouting and going crazy in that scene, and it's got to be orchestrated within an inch of its life, and choreographed.
Yeah, and in particular, I think the bit there, I think you spoke about music, and funny enough, Act 1 is called an overture as well. It's actually written in the text, but in Act 3, I feel like you've got like this. I don't know how to describe it in music terms, but you've got like this nice somber kind of like crescendo of justice, like when Elizabeth Proctor comes in, and then suddenly it's like the bass drum is hit. Bang, and then suddenly it all goes down, and then it all comes back. Then the violins go crazy when Abigail and the girls have realized they've got away with it, and they've got away with it in the court. And I'd sort of describe it as a bit of a victory dance for the girls, because they're just going absolutely crazy. They know that they've got one over John. They know he's going to go to prison. Danforth completely believes them now. They've got the whole court in the palm of their hand, and yet it's the bit where they see a bird walking across the window, and he goes, she's stretching her claws, she's going to come down, she's walking the beam, and then she goes, look out, she's coming down, and the girls just go completely mad. What was it like sort of choreographing that to sort of, so it's not just people screaming at each other? How did you find the balance and everything, which you did perfectly, by the way, because watching it was terrifying and wonderful at the same time? How did you find that balance when it was the screaming?
It's meticulous work. It's really meticulous work. There's the discovery, which is chaotic. You try, and then you start to piece it together. You start to take the strongest pieces. You have a great collaborator like Imogen working with you, and then you've got your actors who are willing to do it again and again. As we discover it. I can't believe it, but it's a decade ago now. So I don't remember the fine tuning of how we did it, but what I remember, like an incredible level of commitment from everyone in the room. You just can't come in there. And then we would mark it. We'd go, okay, so let's go again. Nobody, I've got 2 speeds. It's like, don't give any emotion. We're just walking it. Okay, now I'll give it full tilt. But anything in the middle will set as, and you can't feel it. You can't half, play the clarinet. You've got to hit that wind instrument. It's like you've got to bring the music. So yeah, it was meticulous work, it was chaotic work, and then it became more and more. Slowly you circle in, and it doesn't come quickly. It takes time.
Mm.
And time, directing is mostly managing time,
Yeah.
really. I mean, it's not the artistry of it, but you ignore that at your peril, because I have directed a play in my much earlier, younger days where I had a perfect first half and a very poor second half, because I kept going back to the first half. And you learn you've got to divide up that pie of time, and you've got to come for it all. You've got to methodically, you've got to make your sketch, and then you've got to come back. And so the scene was how I do a whole play. You discover, then you sketch, then you erase, then you sketch again, then you start to add the color, then you add a little more color, then you realize you need to paint over something, So, and you get it slowly but surely.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good lean on to. I want to talk to you about how you work with your actors as well, because again, going back to Jack, I just preface this with a little speech of Danforth, which find so spine chilling, but spine chilling, beautiful, scary, evil, everything all in one, really. And it's the speech he has in Act 4 where he says, "Now hear me and beguile." Basically, he's been told that you need to pardon these women. The courts are like, it's like karma's coming back on the other members of the court and everything. But Danforth is saying standing so strong in his stance, saying that if anyone goes against me, I'll kill him. And he has that speech where he goes, "Hear me and beguile yourselves no more." It's like, I will not hear a single plea for pardon or postponement. Those who will not confess will hang. 12 are already executed, and the names of those blah 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 sent in the village must cast doubt or something. Those that died till now, messed that bit up. But he said, "I would hang 10,000 that dared to rise against the law, and an ocean of salt tears could not melt the resolution of the statutes. Now draw yourselves up like men and help me, as you are bound by heaven to do." And it's like, oh my gosh. Not only is it amazing writing, but I say that because I remember it's in Jack's episode actually. Is it true that there was one time where he was in the middle of Danforth and out of the corner of his eye, you were doing press ups in the corner? Is that right?
Ollie, I have no recall of that, but it's probable. It's probable. I'll tell you what happens as a director is, well, for me anyway, I work very physically with actors. I try and keep physicality alive in the room at all times.
Sure.
Do I need to be doing press ups? Only for myself. So I'm sure what was happening was, for a director, you're sitting in a chair. I very seldom sit, but everything that the actors are feeling, I can't speak for every director, but I'm feeling it's all going through me. Each actor is channeling the highway of their character. All those highways are going through me, and sometimes that physicality gets so stacked up inside me that I'll just need to spend it. I mean, some actors have spoken about how I pace at times, which is the lesser version, but we were doing the Crucible, so that's probably required. I do practice yoga, and my body gets in knots when I direct because I sort of brace, and there's definitely moments where I can feel I'm going to get a terrible headache or something if I don't. Just and maybe it's also I'm just sort of keeping the wheel turning in the room, and I set up a room where anybody at any moment can be alive to the possibility of just taking themselves off to the periphery, and kind of, as long as everybody's alive in that room, that's what matters to me. I always say that most directors don't like cell phones in the room or anything, but for me, I don't like people being in the room learning their lines or reading, or it's not a draconian thing. It's just there's a green room. If you're in the room, you're all in.
Yeah.
And you can be doing, I mean, it sounds like a contradiction because you can be doing press ups, but I just want to feel everybody engaged and intense. And not because I need everybody to be pumping on all cylinders to please me. It's that every actor's taking a risk. Every actor, as they hit the center of the floor, or they have to bring what they have to bring, there's an enormous vulnerability, and we commit. I mean, we know that groups are capable of doing Crucible is a perfect example. We are capable of doing things in groups that we wouldn't do as individuals. So something wild and free happens in the room when everybody's all in. But when you have people kind of sitting in a slightly more passive state or observing, I often get requests every other day for people to say, can I just come in and watch? And I can never, ever say yes to that because it changes the chemistry of the room. It literally changes the chemical nature of the room. Some people are watching and others are trying. And so the trying becomes more awkward when you feel watched. But when everybody's, anyway, so press ups, very possibly. I don't know, but very possibly.
Yeah, I'll ask Jack again about that soon.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, I mean, we'll get into. I said, I've heard you in another interview say that you talked about rehearsal rooms as being like a quote benign dictatorship in some ways. But before we get into that, just very quickly about you mentioned earlier, if you're learning lines in the rehearsal room, you're like no, not here, over there. Green room over there. But when you for you specifically, do you want your actors to be off book on day one, or do you mind if they take a few days to have the script in their hands, or would you prefer them to be word perfect so you can be like, okay, cool, let's discover?
I've changed. I until fairly recently, until the last couple of years, 2 years ago, I was very, very specific about asking actors not to come with their lines learned, because they learn rhythms on their own in solitude. They learn rhythms that are not in reaction to anything. And then you get a very disconnected, acting is people, dialogue is people doing things to each other. A word can be a slap or a tickle or a caress and if you're working out how you're going to do that all by yourself, and you're getting it all inside your body and in your mind without any feedback, you then essentially get these siloed performances, everybody doing what they learned in their room. So I've always been very determined not to have that.
Okay.
And then at some point, I just realized actors, it is possible for actors to learn their line and then come into the room. So now I say, please learn your line, but please learn it with neutrality. Please don't learn emotions that go with. Just learn it like a rote exercise. It's almost like saying, learning a song for school or a poem, in school where you had to learn it. It's like a line run. Just do a line run. So leave the emotional, but it saves enormous amounts of time for the actors to come in, book down, but also. There's something so tremendous about actors like gladiators just being able to get into that arena very quickly and go. Whereas with the book in the hand, it's weeks before you can actually get to the real heat of the scene. So paths. And by the way, when an actor is learning lines in the room, I'm delighted, because actors learning lines is industry. There's an industry. It's beautiful. The room is like a tank of different things going on, but if the actors in the center of the room are feeling that other activity, I will very respectfully, because I am always respectful in a room, I just ask them if it's possible to do that. Keep doing that, but if you can do it in the green room with someone, it's a very alive exercise, but it just dissipates and dilutes the room.
Yeah. I think I think that's one thing I learned at drama school was like you learn it without like you say, neutrality. So you don't put any emotion in it. So if you were learning something like the Tomorrow and Tomorrow speech from Macbeth or something, so you'd learn it like tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, equips this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted falls the way to dusty death. So there's no, you're literally just speeding it. So the words are there, but then I found that once you learn it sort of like that really quickly, then you can mess around with it later, because then the words there and you're not thinking about the next line. It's literally drilled in here, of course in here as well, that you don't need to worry about the next line. You just think about how you're reacting to the other person, right?
Yeah, there are pros and cons to both. There really are, but on balance, I'm currently of the school, please come day one with your lines down. And to a degree, it'll be difficult for the actors, because you also learn lines connected to what you do. So, when I say that I pick up the coffee cup and that's what connects me to what I say. It's very hard to learn lines without actions or emotions. Very, very hard.
Yeah.
But they'll come with primed with it enough that we can then, yeah. So pros and cons, but on balance, I'm of the school now of please put them down.
Cool. I know that for the future.
Right.
But yeah, so I heard you give an interview saying that the rehearsal rooms are, quote, a benign dictatorship. So what did you mean by that?
I mean, it is tongue in cheek. Nobody wants to be stepping into a room that they feel is a dictatorship. But
Of course.
what people do want to step into is a room that is properly led. What I find is that anything is possible. People free themselves up and give when they feel that leadership is strong, safe, is not going to exploit them, is not going to allow anyone else in the room to exploit them. And then, once those rules have been established, I always say to the actors I'm working with, let's create a room in which we are safe enough that we can be dangerous. Because what we want to get to is the danger. Whereas I find there's been a strange inversion in recent times where in a completely understandable attempt, because I think there's been a lot of exploitation and bullying and difficulty in rooms, because actors are, in many ways, the art of acting is surrender. It is the big yes. Yes to your scene partner, yes to what the director, I'll try it. I'm up for trying. And so if they don't feel, I think actors and your team members don't feel protected by strong parameters, and parameters in which they actually, something that's very important to me is that I create a lot of agency in the room. In other words, if you're feeling uncomfortable, I'll set up a way in which you can signal and you can just gently withdraw from the exercise or whatever it is. That doesn't break the exercise for everybody else, but everybody should know their limits. They should know, I can't possibly, I always say to actors, I don't want to set the room at the bar where I don't want to say anything in case I trigger somebody in a personal history that I cannot possibly know all of yours, and you might not even be aware of what your triggers are.
Yeah.
But what I can set up is a room in which you are not only judged but appreciated for knowing what your capacities are, your limits, and push yourself. We are the ones who are. Theatre is a trigger zone. Theatre is a trigger zone.
Yeah.
So I'm not interested in creating theatre that doesn't trigger, but I am interested in creating rooms that feel like you're safe to touch your edges. The benign dictatorship, the benevolent dictatorship is art is not a democracy. I know when I was an actor, I'd been in a room with some directors who would wait and let everybody weigh in on how the scene should be directed, and let actors weigh in on each other's performances, on what other actors, this is so-and-so telling Richard what he thinks Proctor's motivations are. The only conversation happening about Proctor and his motivations is between me and Richard, or Richard and his scene partners. But everything else is, we're expanding into an exercise where we've got multiple directors. And there's I think a lot of directors can operate from ego, in which they want to be the only voice in the room. I'm very interested in the extravagant, extraordinary variety of things available to me in the room and to all of us, with all these brilliant ideas teaming. But one thing I know, if everybody feels like they have to weigh in on how the scene needs to be directed, if everybody feels they need to weigh in on what the scene means, on each other's characters and each other's performances, I think something very destructive happens. Actors start to feel very self-conscious. They don't know who's leading the room. Also, we just don't have the time. We just don't have the time. So, I think actors can have an experience that it's possible for actors to feel held, really held. It's like a family. And when you've got people who are leading that family, parents who are leading that family, going, I'm going to set up the environment that everything is optimal for you to bring your A game. But if you're getting in everybody else's business, I'm going to shut it down.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. I'm going to say, thank you so much. Let's get back to the scene.
Yeah.
So yeah. And, I always use this metaphor. If I'm in a plane and there's turbulence, and the pilot comes onto the intercom system and says, could everybody, just fill out some forms letting me know, or if you could all just pop your head into the cockpit and let me know how to, just what you think about how I should get this plane safely onto the tarmac.
Just land the fucking plane, mate.
Just land the fucking plane. If I have something I don't know how to do and there's someone in the back of the plane who happens to have that special skill, fucking bring him. It's like, we need that.
Right. You over here now.
Over here, into the co-pilot seat, and maybe, but I think if actors come into the room and they are secretly harboring, they may even be unconsciously harboring deep needs to actually be in charge or be the director, I know I have to protect the endeavor from that. But I think this can be abused by directors into silencing people, and I'm not interested in silencing anybody.
Oh, no.
I am interested in a room in which, and also a lot of people tend to dominate the conversation, and that can come down to race, gender. I mean, it just cuts along such clear lines in every room.
Yeah.
And so I am interested in a room where I am very clear about how much time we've got to spend on something, about where we're not intervening with each other's work. And don't intervene in what I have to do here. I have not come into this room unprepared. I know what needs to happen here. And I'm open to that being completely turned on its head. I'm not saying I can work out what needs to happen at home. But what I can't do is indulge everybody's need to weigh in as a kind of quasi surrogate director or directing, trying to coach each other, because often there are other agendas. The way you've decided your characters may need a particular feed from your scene partner, and that can be very legitimate, but it can also become a very subversive thing where an actor unconsciously, because actors I think always have extraordinary intentions, but they'll start pulling the scene towards their first decision about what the scene needs to be. And it's I will serve all those actors best by gatekeeping and making sure that actually maybe the first choice you've made is not the most interesting one. Let's keep digging. But I have the scent. I know what we're chasing. I have to have the bigger picture. If you're trying to be in the scene and have the bigger picture, you're not in your work enough.
Yeah.
Just like if I get lost in just one character and talking to just one actor, I'm not holding the bigger picture. So yeah, it's not a democracy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Just
I feel.
land.
No, I feel like the one thing I really admire about your work actually is many things, but two in particular is that I'm right in thinking that you don't like, obviously you just explained that you like to be up on your feet right away. It's that you don't do table reads. And if anyone doesn't know what a table read but like the first day you sit at a table, endless cups of coffee, and you basically talk about the play. It's like, what does that bit mean? Oh, I think this means nobility. This means here's a progression of the ideas at the time. It's like, well, yeah, that's all really, really nice. But you're not. But you want to be, and I feel like as well. I just want to get up. Let's go. Let's start discovering this. Let's start getting this in our bodies from the word goes, because as you know, it's an infinite discovery process. And that brings me on to my second point, which is, again, Richard said in the interview, and there was something I've took from that interview and like from yourself and everything, saying, never stop searching. I mean, he said that you said to him and the rest of the company, never stop searching. Even on that last performance, pick up the script and look through it. I think, is there something I've missed? Is there something is there something I'm still not getting or something? So how important is it that you want your actors to never stop searching, even on the last show?
I have a kind of horror of this word. Producers will use it. Okay, that's the time when the show is locked. That's the time when the show is frozen. Now, I understand what they mean for safety and all kinds of things. There's, by the time you open, you've made all the decisions you're going to make. But the actors have to be in the exploration to the last show. And that doesn't mean they're trying brand new things and throwing their scene partner. It means the battle needs to be fought anew every day. And you've got to make it fresh. You've got to make it alive. You've got to be listening is a very active state, and it's a discovery state. So yeah, I think that this endeavor, I worked for a while with Bruce Myers from the Peterbrook Company. We were actually doing some early readings of Lear. We were sort of playing around with stuff many years ago, and I remember we were very close, and he I can't remember. We had a phone call the one day. We used to chat, and he had gone into the booth or wherever they were performing on that particular night, and he said he was 70 something years old when he made this, when we were speaking, and he said, "Oh," I said, "What are you doing at the theatre so early? Isn't your show only at your warm up only at such and such a time?" And he said, "Yes, darling, but I've come in to just work out how I put the pants on. I've never quite cracked that, and it's a bit of an emotional journey for the character and how he gets those pants on." And this was the last show, and they had toured the world, and they were doing their last show for the last. And he had gone in early to make a new discovery about how he was going to get the pants on. And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the artist that is, if you get to that place where you're just like, oh, no, I just got to phone it in now, basically. Just turn up like a bot and just deliver. We're not, it's live transmission. It's live transmission. We are in the business of transmitting something live to your partner, your scene partner on stage, and to your audience.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah. Let's see what time. Yeah, I know we're a bit pushed for time because I know you've got to shoot off to do other things, Yael. But but thank you for the time that you've given me today. I really appreciate it. Just got a couple more things left for you. Now, this story just popped into my head just a second ago, actually. You talking about the Peter Brook, the guys and everything, these pretty well-established actors have been doing it for years, but yet they're still trying to work it out. They're still trying to get things right. And there's a fantastic story of Laurence Olivier. I don't know if you've heard of it, when he was doing Othello. And basically one performance, something happened in this performance. It's just his performance just went to a universal level in this thing, and actors were gathering in the wings just looking at him from the sides going, wow, what's he doing? And he got about a 20-minute standing ovation that night. The audience just would not let him go. And then the actors were gathering on the corridor towards his dressing room, and they applauded him on the way down. But as he went through the crowd, he completely ignored everybody. He ignored everyone and went straight to his dressing room, slammed the door and locked it. And everyone's just going, what's going on? That was one of the greatest performances we've ever seen in the theatre. Anyway, it petered out, and later that night, I think it was the stage manager knocked on the door and said, "Larry, can I come in?" He was like, "Yes, come in." He sat there, and the place had been wrecked. Tables had been overturned, chairs had been thrown, and he's just in a complete mess. And I think he or she, I can't remember what gender it was, but the stage manager goes, "Larry, what's wrong? You were stupendous." And he said, I know I was. It's just that I have no idea how I do that again.
Oh, I mean, I talk about this to actors, the slippery pig. I always say to them, it's like trying to catch a pig that you've oiled. You do it, and if you the next night on the endeavor of trying to do it like you did it last night, you're not in it. I mean, acting is, for me, as close. I don't know that there's all physical activities. It's just that I happen to be involved in theatre, but it is such a parallel to meditation. If you're thinking about how to do it, you're not doing it. If you're attempting to do it as well as the last time you did it, you're not doing it. You're only doing it if you're in it and you're in the moment. And there are ways to, I think a director can sit there and sort of analyze for an actor, oh, you hit that note there, and that, and a relationship like I had with Richard, which continues to be one of the richest creative relationships. You find these people. It's like a creative marriage where you speak the same language. And Richard was just always just devoted to that search. And we would have 2 shows twice a week. There'd be a show on every day except Sundays or Mondays, I can't remember, but on Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Yeah,
And there would be, with the warm up and makeup and everything, Richard would have about 20 minutes between shows. And I would go into I'd stand by the door, and he'd be on his back, and he'd just indicate I must come in.
Yeah.
I'd sit down on the floor with him. I'd give him his notes, and he would just lie there nodding. Because when we filmed The Crucible, because usually the director leaves after opening, and I have to get back to my daughter, and I was living in Montreal at the time. But for the summer, for the filming of the show, Richard said he wouldn't do it unless I was brought back. And so I was with them throughout this process. So I was really there while they were performing, and it was the same during previews. He would take the notes, and then he'd just get back on that stage. I mean, I remember going out the back, and there were people lined up all the way to the end of the block, and people incensed that he hadn't come out to sign autographs between. And I was like, I nearly lost my shit. Do you know what this man is doing?
Do you not know what he's doing in there?
Do you have any idea? He was doing 8 hours a day on stage, full throttle. The show was almost 4 hours.
Yeah.
With 20 minutes between. Anyway, but Richard is devoted to that search. He's devoted to that search. And he works thematically. When we were trying to find Act 4, and Proctor walks in, and Miller describes him as almost having cobwebs in his eyes. And, and he came in, and I just said, Rich, stand there. And I asked several of the girls to just hang off his arms, literally all their body weight. So he was like holding, 4 or 5 girls who, probably at the least were 50 kilograms each, hanging off of him. And at one point he just popping out for a minute, went out, came back in and carried on. And later I said, Rich, were you all right? And he went, yeah, I just went out to throw up and came back. It's like, Richard, if you need to throw up, that's not an exercise we should, I don't want you to go that far. And he was like, no, I was getting a lot out of that. I will not forget what that felt like. And I'm not saying one has to throw up in a scene exploration, but Richard he's one of those actors that he's not stupid about it. He's not going to seriously harm himself, but he is devoted to the search. And I will just walk backwards over broken glass bare feet for 1,000 years for an actor like that. We can go anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get this story, and I know we've got only a few minutes left, but I want to get this story and actually just relating back to the rehearsal room and stuff, and how I'm just reminded of a mutual friend of ours, the great Adrian Schiller, who played Reverend Hale, who sadly passed away last year. I was lucky enough to do a podcast with Adrian on here a couple of years ago. So please go check it out, guys. Adrian speaks so fluidly and brilliantly about the Crucible and the process and everything. So wherever you are, Adrian, we thank you and we love you. We love you, man. He told this story about rehearsals, and I know you want to sort of talk about this, where he sort of, in the episode, he says, it's like sometimes in rehearsals he would be like, but Yaël, he'd be like, shh, we're doing it my way. Isn't that what the shh? We're doing it my way, or something. What does that story mean to you?
Yeah, I think that I think it goes back to what we were speaking about. A director has to be incredibly careful about time.
Yeah.
A director has to be incredibly careful about actors who might have, Adrian was an incredibly smart man and a brilliant actor, by the way. What he brought to Hale was just extraordinary. But I think it goes back to strong leadership. It's not to shut actors down. I would never use language that is beyond my vocabulary. I would never use that is aggressive. And I remember from your interview, I think he sort of remembered that as more aggressive than it was. Yeah. What it is, though, is I think leadership has to be conducted in a way that is also looking after the rest of the room, is looking after the clock on the wall. And I will say this, female leadership is very complicated. I think we, and this is certainly not just speaking about any one company member now, but generally speaking, when you've got a cast that was as male heavy as the Crucible was, you know, you are going to be in many situations where people want to talk a lot and want to express how they think it should be done, and I think that can be a very rich dialogue, but we don't have time for that. To a point, we do, and I actually make time available to a great degree for discussing what are we going for? What's the why? I mean, theatre always comes down to the why. Why are we here? So I actually put a lot of precious real estate of time for that. But there is a point where it is so critical for everybody. I remember in the Crucible, because it was such a big company and there was so much talking that would go on. And individual company members would come up to me and go, like, we're going to run out of time. They were anxious. We're going to run out of time. I was watching the clock. And there just comes a point, actually, there's a wonderful woman at the Globe, and I'd really love to leave this with your viewers, Lynn MacDonald. This woman is a witch, and I mean witch as in that's my highest compliment I can give a woman, by the way, because she's got a preternatural understanding of what makes humans tick, what makes actors tick. Anyway, and I went to her one day. She does body work on me. Richard introduced her to me. So once a week I was going for body work with her. She does the Alexandra technique, but she does energy release and does a quick diagnosis of the body. And she was feeling me. She said, "Oh, you're very stacked up with a lot of, it's all backed up in there. Director, you're directing the Crucible. Of course it will be. My back was a mess, you know."
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But she said to me, you know, I explained to her, I've got, you know, there's it's that room where you've got a lot of people with opinions, and they, you know, and it's a constant kind of clearing the field to just keep going for the silver bullet of the scene. And she said to me, you know, the occipital, I hope I don't misquote her here, but what she basically described to me was that in the action to shake your head, you actually have to disengage something in the occipital off the back of the top of the spine to be able to shake your head, to say no. So she said, it's a great practice to get into disengage, to say, that's wonderful, and that's not what we're doing today. So it was this incredible gift she gave me, because as a director, and I think particularly women are very trained to do this, to make everybody feel heard, to make everybody feel understood, to make sure everybody's feeling. But there's a point where if you are a leader, you're in dereliction of your duties. If that clock is running out, and more importantly, people's opinions and et cetera, are crossing over into each other's work. You just got to call it. Yeah. And I think some people will experience that as a shutting down, but that to me is the safe room. That's the room. There are rooms where people get told to shut up, and it's not a safe room. But a room where you're being told, hang on, we're moving on.
Yeah.
Because, and just trust me, I've got all the right reasons for why we need to move on right now. It'll even take too much time to explain why. Let's move on.
Yeah.
That to me is the safe room in which we can be dangerous and brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. And so I say that in tongue in cheek, of course. No offense, we haven't been there at all. But yeah, I just got. I know we're slightly over. I've only got one more question for you, Yaël. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. It would be two finishes, but we got time for one today. I think you probably mentioned this already, but so to finish, what's been an experience or experiences you've had in your career up to now that you'll never ever forget?
Oh my God, Ollie. I mean, God, it's such a privileged life. As you say that, I'm just, it's a banquet. I'm spoiled for choice. Something I'll never forget. I mean, I worked with a death row survivor, Duma Khumalo, who was on apartheid South Africa's death row. Mm-hmm. And I had experiences with Duma. We went and bribed the prison that had now been, it was no longer, the death penalty was banned once the ANC came into power. Mm-hmm. We went to the prison and we bribed one of the guards to give us all the shoes and the uniforms from death row, which Duma would have worn. Somewhere in that pile would have been uniforms he wore. He came within 15 hours of being hanged for a so-called political crime. That was a framing, and also the whole system was rigged.
Jesus.
And we sat in the rehearsal room, and I remember just taking all those piles of clothing out of the boxes, and both of us and the other people who were in the room being overwhelmed by the smell, watching Duma go through these uniforms. And he said a prayer. He wasn't a religious man, but he said a prayer. And then we discovered this moment. We had a younger Duma, that it was this conceit that I had where he would kind of enact Duma's memories. And Lebo got underneath the uniforms, and I covered him with all the uniforms. And then as Duma was speaking, I said to Lebo, stand up, and the uniforms kind of fell off him, and Duma turned to look at his younger self emerge from the past. I mean, this is just one, and Duma
Wow.
just, I just remember his face, and I remember the power of theatre, and I remember, and then that moment every night that it happened, watching Duma watch himself emerge from the past, I'd then look at the audience. I mean, I created a show, Nirbhaya, women in India who'd survived sexual assault. We told the story of Jyoti Singh Pandey, who was gang raped and murdered on a bus. Those rehearsals were just extraordinary. And I remember the laughter, laughter as a survival mechanism in the room. We lived in India. I lived with the company in India on an ashram for several weeks, making the work before we went to Edinburgh. And just the dark humor and the beauty and the bonding in that, I remember, I mean, this is so random, but going into Richard Armitage's dress rehearsal, just because we've spoken a lot about the Crucible today, and I kept saying to Richard, there's a particular point in one of, I can't remember the exact line now, but it's when just before he says, because I sign a lie and sign myself to lies, because I'm not worth the dust on the feet of them that hang.
Yeah, but because
I've
it is
given
my
my
name.
soul.
Yeah,
Yes,
giving you my soul, like my name. Yeah.
leave me my name. And I can't remember what it was, but I kept saying to him, Rich, you've got to come off the yelling voice there and into something tender. And each show I watched him stay with the kind of the powering in. And he said, if I come off vocally there, I don't know if I can get back on. I'm just scared to come off. And I was sitting there in the one show, and yeah, my daughter Ella, who was 6 years old at the time, was sitting next to me, and Richard, he dared to step off that vocal quality and into the tender voice in that moment. And I just remember my daughter saying, Mommy, are you crying? Because I just took a breath, because I saw the moment that he decided to go. It's a small thing, but to me and Richard, it was a victory. I went into his dressing room afterwards, and I just walked in and I went down on my knees. He was sitting broken in the chair after 2 shows on a Saturday. I just went down on my knees, kneeled down to talk to him, and also because I was like, if ever there was a moment to worship someone, it's now.
Mm-hmm.
I looked up at him, and we were both tearful, and he just went, I did it. I was like, yeah, you did it. And it's such a small thing, Ollie. He came off a vocal quality into another.
Yeah.
But these are the minutiae that make up a great performance.
Yeah. Wow. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah. I could just see him going, I did it. Small,
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
small thing. But as we know in life, the small things, they go a heck of a long way.
It's everything. All the small things are the thing.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yael, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, I've still got so many more things I want to talk to you. I've got more things about the Crucible. I want to talk to you about King Lear that was on last year and everything, but we are out of time, unfortunately. But we will continue this conversation very soon. Still got so much more left to talk to you about. Yeah, love to have you back and everything. But thank you so much for your time today. I know we've run over, so thank you for being so gracious with that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure being here with you, Ollie. Thank you.
No, it's great. If you just hang on, we'll finish the recording. Blah 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 blah. We'll finish the recording, and then I'll let you go. But yeah, but guys, wow! Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I'll be back very, very soon. And Yaël Farber, you're just an absolute legend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali.